easily.
This time, Gacy couldn't talk his way out of trouble. Police didn't buy his story and got a warrant to search his house. While they found nothing they could tie to Piest, they did discover numerous personal items belonging to other missing teenagers. Gacy was now a murder suspect, but without the bodies, little could be done. Gacy was placed under 24-hour surveillance. If he was nervous about the police presence, he was putting up a good front. The first night of the stakeout, Gacy picked up the officer's dinner tab.
My partner and I had to continuously remind each other that he's a suspect for murder. I mean, he was a very likable guy, and he never really intimidated you. He wasn't the kind of guy that you'd be afraid of, but he was a hustler.
Gacy even had the surveillance team over to his house for a fish dinner. When one of the officers smelled a foul odor coming from the air vents, investigators were all but convinced that the crawl space below had become Gacy's makeshift burial ground.
We weren't giving up, and he could not lose the evidence. He was sitting on the evidence. And he knew we were seeking a second search warrant. So John was cornered.
Gacy realized the truth about his serial killings would soon be exposed. Out of desperation, he met with his attorney for an all-night confession.
And then he looked at me and said, I've been the judge, jury, and executioner of many, many people. Now I want to be my own judge, jury, and executioner. I don't want you to interfere. I'm going to tell you everything from the beginning. I kept telling him it was unbelievable, and that's why he offered to show me the crawl space. He was going to prove to me that he committed the murders, and I don't want any part of that.
Amirante didn't need to see it, because within hours, investigators were on their way. They had their second search warrant. When they descended into the crawl space, it didn't take long for them to dig up a human bone. On December 21st, 1978, John Wayne Gacy was arrested for murder. At the police station, Gacy seemed to take the news well and even joked with police while they were booking him. When investigators asked where he was born, Gacy looked up and proclaimed that he was, quote, born in a state of confusion. The mugshot captured Gacy laughing at his own wit. Gacy also told police that he was not responsible for his brutal acts because he was suffering from a multiple personality disorder.
He knew we were going to get the rest of the bodies, and he knew we had human bones, and he knew we weren't going to stop. So now as he's backtailing, he's saying, all right, I'm nuts.
Gacy's home in suburban Chicago was besieged by a fleet of officers and evidence technicians. Captured on this rare police video, the excavation of the crawl space was carried out with the precision of an archaeological dig. Piece by piece, officers lifted the remains of Gacy's victims through the floorboards and carried them out the front door. It was then that John Wayne Gacy was introduced to the world as the worst serial killer in American history. Yet Gacy seemed more concerned with the police rummaging through his home than with his criminal notoriety.
He wanted to make sure his bar that had like 20-some cases of old Milwaukee sitting around it, that he made sure that nothing was done there and that we didn't dirty his floors.
Those who thought they knew him best, his own family, realized they had no idea who John Gacy was.
I went into first a denial stage, and then I went into anger. And I told him how much I just hated everything that he had brought upon us. And I saw in my mother, I saw something die in her. There was never that light again. There was never that twinkle in her eye from that day forth. It was like someone put the light out, and she got rejected because of her love. And she said to me, I'm a mother. I love him. How can I stop loving him?
33 bodies were found in all. Now, John Gacy's fate for committing these hideous crimes would be determined in a Chicago courtroom. In February 1980, 37-year-old John Wayne Gacy went on trial in Chicago for the murders of 33 young men and boys. His case attracted widespread attention as people struggled to understand how anyone could be responsible for so many appalling crimes. Hoping to save Gacy's life, his attorneys entered a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity. John did not appear worried about being considered a crazed serial killer. Instead, he was afraid the public might think he was homosexual, a charge he denied.
I would definitely not be homosexual. I have nothing against what they do, and I don't deny that I've engaged in sex with males, but that I'm bisexual.
Gacy was no textbook criminal. Even the psychiatric experts who testified at his trial were baffled by his complex personality.
He fit absolutely nowhere. No known diagnostic categories. Part of it is because we don't know what these serial murderers are. We know what they do, but we don't know what they are.
The jury was not interested in figuring out who John Gacy was. On March 13, 1980, Gacy was found guilty and sentenced to death. Afterwards, he consoled his defense team and then asked to speak with his prosecutors.
He congratulated them for doing a great job. He said they did what they had to do, and he respected what they did, and they did a great job, and he actually congratulated them on getting the death penalty.
The serial killer was sent to death row at the Menard Correctional Center in southern Illinois. He quickly cashed in on his criminal celebrity by becoming an artist. Gacy's artwork won praise from those who appreciated the macabre image of a killer clown. In 1988, John exploited his notoriety by proclaiming his innocence. He wrote and published a book he titled A Question of Doubt. In it, he passed himself off as the 34th victim and claimed that all the bodies discovered beneath his home were planted there by his employees.
The idea that I'm a homosexual thrill killer, that I strolled down the streets and stalked young boys and slaughtered them. Hell, if you could see my schedule, my work schedule, you know damn well that I was never out there.
One person who kept on believing Gacy was his mother, Marion. Then after a series of strokes, she lost all memory of her son and his crimes. She died in 1989. 5 years later, on May 10, 1994, Gacy's execution date arrived. He was to die by lethal injection at the Stateville Prison in Joliet, just south of Chicago. His sister Karen was there for the final hours.
I was losing a brother. I was losing someone that I loved. Of course, there was great sadness to have to part and say a final goodbye, to know that this person's not dying because they're sick. They're dying because someone's going to murder them.
Hundreds gathered outside the prison walls to celebrate Gacy's execution. Supporters of the death penalty believed that if anyone should be executed, it was John Gacy. The revelers waited for the countdown.
We had all leaned over, and I said, "John, have you made your peace with God?" And he said, "I have." And he said, "I love you." That was the very last thing he said, "I love you." And I told him the same thing, that I loved him. And I guess that's when it all came to a head, that this was it.
At 12:40 a.m., John closed his eyes and took a deep breath before the doctor injected the needle. 18 minutes later, 52-year-old John Wayne Gacy was dead. At 3 a.m., his body was secretly transported to a nearby hospital where Dr. Helen Morrison, a forensic psychiatrist, waited to extract Gacy's brain.
There are so many questions, basically, that come up. What happened prenatally? What happened in the development? What happened to the brain? Can we start doing some human experimentation?
Dr. Morrison thought Gacy's brain might show signs of abnormality that could possibly explain his actions. Yet, after examining it, she found nothing. No biological evidence that shed light on Gacy's severe psychological problem, leaving the world with an enduring mystery.
I believe, and continue to believe, that what we don't know about John Gacy is more vast than we will ever imagine in my lifetime or in yours.
When he was good, John, he was the best of good, and he had a high drive for success. But when he was bad, he was the worst of evil, and he had a high drive for destruction.
Johnny didn't even know who Johnny was. Johnny was playing a role, like on a stage. Various parts. Maybe he would have been what he wanted to be. That governor, that politician, that senator. You know, we talk here of all these things. He had the capability.
None of it makes sense. For his character, for everything we knew about him, I just can't picture that his sexual appetite got so much out of control. I don't think we ever know the person. I really don't. I don't think there's any way you can ever know what's going on through another person. And it's kind of scary to think that we don't know. I mean, we just really don't know.